Good morning. I am Lori Edwards and I will be your host today. I'm a senior product manager at niche.com, a member of the 2021 Women in Product Content Selection Committee, and a co founder of the Women in Product Toastmasters Club. Welcome to the Spotlight on Skills stage. Before we get started, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors, without whom this event would not be possible. As we continue our skills journey, the theme you'll be hearing on this stage is writing, co creating, and measuring your way to product market fit. While our presenters share their expertise with us, I encourage you to turn off those notifications and jump into the chat and share any questions, quotes, or pro tips you may have. For this session, Envisioning and Developing a Successful Product, we have three incredible speakers. First on stage, we have Alysha Cormack. Alysha is a senior product manager with Disney Media and Entertainment Distribution on the sports product team. As an avid sports fan, she thrives in the fast-paced world of the ESPN app. Alysha focuses on driving new features and delivering immersive experiences to sports fans everywhere. She'll be sharing those expertise with you during her presentation, Basic Foundations of Effective Requirements. Please join me in welcoming Alysha to our stage.
Hi everyone, I'm Alysha Cormack. I'm a senior product manager with Disney Media and Entertainment Distribution. I sit in the sports product vertical. So my primary focus is the ESPN app, which you should each absolutely run to the App Store and download immediately. Shameless plug aside, I'm here today, virtually of course, because we're in 2021, to speak with you all about a topic many of us see day to day in our roles as product managers, writing product requirements. Whether you're writing requirements for an entirely new product, whether you're writing requirements for a new feature, writing for improvements to an existing feature or an existing product, or anything in between, writing requirements, no matter the format that you use within your organization, is of course a huge piece of creating a smooth product lifecycle. Requirements are read and interpreted by what sometimes, at least I know to me, sometimes can seem to be an unlimited group of stakeholders across your organization or even across multiple organizations or business units within your company. Today, we're going to talk about some best practices and helpful hints we can use to improve written requirements in our daily practice. So, why is this important? As product managers, when our requirements are streamlined, when they're clear, when they're easy to read, and easy to understand, our engineering and QA partners have the ability to efficiently build these great products that we've conceptualized and put on paper. So not only do effective requirements help to kick off an effective product lifecycle by providing engineering teams with the tools that they need to go out and build these products, they also allow for QA teams to build test cases against them and ultimately allow us to maintain a historical record. This historical record can be referenced down the road by our colleagues at any time, even in the case where we may no longer be involved with the maintenance or be involved with the development of a specific product or feature. They can go back and reference our requirements as a reference. They also allow us to effectively communicate with peripheral stakeholders. So maybe leadership who may not have as intimate of a level of understanding of the product as we would working with it in our daily practice. We all know that ultimate goals are for anyone reading your requirements to have the ability to have a complete understanding of the product or feature without having any prior knowledge of the product or feature, which I know is much easier said than done. So my hope here today is that you'll be able to walk away from this session with some new tools to write effective requirements for all stakeholders, also to be able to establish an efficient structure in your requirements, and finally, to work through some common challenges that we all see in our day-to-day as product managers. It's hard to jump right into speaking about writing requirements without quickly touching on the product discovery process. So, recognizing an opportunity. Framing a problem and identifying potential solutions to that problem is key in making that first step to jump into the product lifecycle. Once you've been able to identify a potential opportunity, then you can answer, does this opportunity make sense to pursue? This is where data becomes your friend. We can use data to make informed decisions around whether or not we want to move forward with an opportunity. So where does this project provide value? What KPIs are we targeting here? What are the realistic improvements of these KPIs and your desired results? How does this support our business goals? This may be directly or indirectly supporting our business goals. So this could be directly via hard numbers. Maybe that is something like generating additional subscribers for your product or boosting the time spent per user. Or this can be indirect, so through something like general improvements to the stability of your product or the performance of your product, which ultimately improves the sentiment of your users. Feel free to share any value propositions, KPIs, or opportunities that you target for your products with the group using the chat feature. A few that I like to focus on personally are daily active users and time spent within the app. So while you all continue to share, we can look back at everything we just discussed and determine if this allows us to decide, is the project worth the effort? So is the value that we're seeing here worth the time that all of the dependent teams are going to put into building out this project? Even if we don't fully understand the scope of the project at this point in the process, which is very common, it's still helpful to have an idea of how much of an impact we may see so that when the project is ultimately scoped, we can make a decision as to whether or not it makes sense to move forward with the project and where we can slot it into our roadmap if that's what we're choosing to do. And finally, understanding your users. Is your product targeted directly toward consumers? Is it targeted toward businesses? Is your product meant for internal stakeholders? Once you know this, you can then plan to interpret the expectations of those users by consulting with key stakeholders within those groups directly and understanding their needs and desires as a user of your product. User testing can also be a big piece here, and it's really important to consider user testing early in the product lifecycle. Considering user testing early allows us to get the greatest value out of the results by being able to have integrated any key learnings into our requirements before the development process begins. Now that we're through the discovery process and we've decided to move forward with our opportunity, we can now start to formulate our requirements. Before we get into actually writing our requirements, I want to acknowledge that I realize that we all do this differently. I spoke about this a little bit at the beginning of this session, but dependent upon the development methodology in which we work, we're all writing requirements differently. What we're going to cover today can be used across these methodologies and help set us up for success regardless of the format of our requirements. This isn't meant to be prescriptive to one methodology or another, but meant to be delivered as helpful hints and helpful tips. So before even sitting down to write your requirements, setting goals for our product requirements helps to build a foundation that guides us along the way and gives a baseline which we can work toward. So personally, I like to start every set of requirements asking 3 questions. And these are the questions that I'm looking to answer through the goals that I'm setting for my requirements and for my product. Who, what, and why is where I like to start. So we can probably answer these questions pretty easily given the product discovery, but sometimes it can help to lay them out clearly as a part of our requirements. Who will be using the product? So this goes back to the product discovery process and understanding your audience. Who are your users and what is the high-level use case or high-level situation in which your product will be used? What is the purpose of this product? What will be the actual experience this product or feature delivers or will improve for our users? So what are we shipping? And why are we building this? What is our ultimate goal here? What's the impact that we're looking to make on our users or on the product itself? So what value are we actually driving for the business? So these goals, as I acknowledged, tie directly back to our product discovery process, but they also tie directly into another important piece that we need to consider in our goal setting, which is setting goals for our product itself. So again, in the product discovery process, we outline the potential for our project to provide value and to support our business goals. But now we'll want to highlight those objectives and identify how these will be measured through 3 key steps. The first is setting strategic objectives. So which are the business goals we identified in the discovery process that we like to support through the release of this product? The second, identifying attainable metrics. What are a realistic set of metrics which we can target against our objectives to provide value to the business? And finally, measuring specific targets. So now that we've set our objectives and that we've identified our metrics, how can we ensure that we're setting our product release up to measure these targets accurately and that we can deliver the results of our objectives to our stakeholders at key milestones within the product release cycle? So how can we share our successes and how can we investigate new opportunities here? Fully identifying our goals to include as a part of our requirement writing process then allows us to check back in at any point to make sure that we're on track. Do the requirements that we've written ultimately support our goals? Once we have all of our goals set, then we can finally jump in to start what you're all here for, which is formulating our requirements. Creating a structure and a hierarchy for your requirements. Again, no matter how you're delivering your requirements, this can be a full-scale PRD, this can be broken out into separate individual user stories. However you deliver your requirements within your organization, creating a structure and a hierarchy really helps to set effectively what is an outline for your product. So a good strategy here is to start at the top by identifying your overarching goal around the task as a whole. Then taking that goal and breaking it out into pieces that may become your user stories or your incremental pieces of your larger project. The top of your structure will be representative of the foundation for the entire product or feature and should set you up well to fill in the rest, the smaller pieces, the building blocks. So once we've identified our high-level goal, then we can move on to those building blocks. We can begin to fill in the pieces by laying out a list of the smaller components which make up our larger product. So your incremental pieces here should be detailed and specific, and you should be able to complete these in any order. It also helps if you have a hierarchy for your components here. So whether that order is visually linear or by feature priority, organizing your individually components in a logical way helps you to further define your structure and your standards. So now that we have the beginnings of a simple structure, we can now start to break out the feature-specific pieces. So the components that make up your new product or feature. We can take our list of these smaller components and nest them together within groups that make sense. Then moving on to include any universal components or requirements that are standardized throughout your organization. So this can be something like accessibility requirements or advertising specifications or even SEO requirements, any requirement that persists across the products in your organization. So as a product owner, you may not be directly responsible for writing the requirements for these universal components yourself, but I find it really helpful to at least put placeholders in for reference from the beginning so that they're accounted for upfront and not an afterthought during development. That way, while reviewing requirements, these product owners can go back and insert their respective requirements at any time, but they're at least accounted for upfront. Finally, building in space to include any additional resources that may enhance our requirements, like design specifications or related technical documentation, which may help your engineers. Now that we have a solid foundation, we can use this to set expectations for the format of each component. This helps our stakeholders to be able to efficiently flow from one component to the next during the development process. So similarly to how we set the goals of our requirements as a whole at the beginning of the process, we can take those same questions and apply them here to use them as a format to define the intended functionality for each of these smaller components, the pieces of our puzzle. Who is the user? What are they doing? And why are they doing it? So from here, using these questions, we're able to set up ourselves to easily and efficiently outline our full-scale requirements by keeping in mind just a few key directives. That first directive is breaking out requirements one at a time. This helps us to maintain a consistent structure for each component. And keeping this in mind also helps us to split up complex requirements and avoid cross-referencing across documents. So similarly to how we would want anyone reading our requirements as a whole to have a complete understanding of the entire product or feature, anyone reading a specific piece of our requirements should also have a complete understanding of that specific component. They shouldn't need to reference any other components, any other pieces of your requirements, or even any other outside documents to understand how this works in full detail. Making them easy to read is also important here. It's really important to use concise sentences for clarity and avoid verbose paragraphs, filler words, or added fluff. This really helps to highlight the key elements and the ultimate goal for each individual requirement. We should also aim to avoid duplication and contradiction within our requirements so that our stakeholders can have a single focus. And finally, we should focus on describing what should be done and not how something should be built. So it's our role to describe our expectations and the role of the engineers to uphold our expectations and interpret them to meet our requirements. Using clear examples when relevant also helps us to set expectations and to avoid ambiguity by defining exactly what we would expect a user to see in a particular use case or a particular scenario with real data and real feedback. And finally, accounting for all use cases. So after our requirements are clear and broken out, we can then focus on identifying any necessary use cases within each component, including any edge cases. So it's really important to remember here that there are many times where we won't catch every use case and we won't fill in every gap. And this is an important piece where we can lean on our stakeholders to provide feedback and help us to fill any gaps here before we move into the development process and are able to include them upfront in our requirements. So each of these steps should allow us to outline our requirements in a way that our engineering partners can effectively build out our product or feature. These steps also allow our QA partners the ability to write test cases against them and to validate the work. And finally, the structure allows for any other stakeholders to understand the intended functionality of our project, which, if you remember from the beginning, is our ultimate goal here. So now that we've built out our structure and defined the intended functionality of each piece of our product, we can now look at our documentation as a single source of truth for our product. We're now able to check back in with the goals that we set at the beginning of the process. Did we write effective requirements? So looking back at our requirements, we can ask ourselves, did we outline our purpose? Who are our users? What are we looking to build? And why are we building it? Do our requirements describe the full scope of the product? Did we identify key components? Did we account for all use cases within our requirements? Can we, within our requirements, define our MVP? Can we identify the minimum included features that we'll need to ship in order to consider our product a success? And does this then allow us to establish a criteria for testing and a criteria for release of our product? And finally, are we now able to set a realistic schedule so that we can track these milestones against our initial requirements? If we can look back at our requirements and have successfully been able to touch on these 4 pieces, we're now able to glide smoothly into our next steps and move toward a successful product release. So with that, I'll wrap up with one of my favorite product quotes by Jeff Bezos. Be stubborn on vision, but flexible on detail. I think this quote really highlights our roles as product managers and really epitomizes the impacts that our requirements should have. In writing our requirements, we're looking to drive the vision of the product, the ultimate end goal. But the paths that carry us through to a release, from conception to release, can ultimately allow for flexibility along the way. We're driving the vision and allowing for flexibility on the detail. I hope that some of these simple suggestions help you to confidently create a structured system for writing your requirements and not only allow for you to be more efficient as a product manager and more effective in your day-to-day, but also for your dependent teams to move more swiftly and ultimately to ship the great products that we all love to ship. Thanks.
Thank you, Alysha. Up next, please welcome Jasmine Lawrence. Jasmine currently serves as a product manager at X, the Moonshot factory on the Everyday Robot project. She also founded Eden Bodyworks at the young age of 13 to meet her own needs for affordable, natural hair and body care products. Outside of work, Jasmine is a poet, STEM advocate, and advisory board member for the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurs. Today, she'll be sharing her mastery of building together how to co-develop a product. Help me in welcoming Jasmine.
Hello, and welcome to the Women in Product Conference. My name is Jasmine Lawrence, and today I'll be giving you an introduction to co-development. Today I'll discuss what co-development is and how you can do it well. Let me tell you a little bit more about myself. I serve as a product manager at X, the Moonshot factory. I work on the Everyday Robot project, where we're creating robots that can learn how to help people in their everyday lives. I'm also the founder and CEO of Eden Bodyworks. Eden Bodyworks is a company that I started in middle school. Eden creates natural hair and body care products to help women around the world live happier and healthier lives. In the past, I've worked at several consumer electronics, at companies such as Microsoft, Facebook, and SoftBank. And outside of work, I really enjoy staying active and expressing my creativity through poetry. Now let's dive into co-development. What is co-development and why would you do it? Well, I believe that co-development is an amazing opportunity to build together. Co-development is when partner teams have a mutual investment of both time and resources to create a solution to a significant problem. This could be between an organization that has the means to create a solution and an organization that is struggling with a particular problem. But the request to engage in this type of co-development relationship can honestly come from either side. It could be an organization is struggling with a problem, so they put out a request for proposal, looking for organizations to chime in with their bids on what solutions could solve that organization's problems. But it could be a company that wants to enter a new domain, and so they seek partners to help them develop a technology or a solution to solve problems in that domain. So why would you even do co-development? This process is amazing for product managers because it allows you to do iterative, needs-based development. While you could look at surveys or other data during the co-development process, which I'll talk a little bit more about in the past, you really get to immerse yourself in the world of your partners and truly find unique needs that you couldn't just read about. When you're working deeply with those partners, you're able to do focused user testing and observe their day-to-day workflows. This is a luxury that most product managers don't have access to. And so when you have a tightly coupled relationship in the co-development process, you get this first and foremost. Lastly, you have early market validation. You can choose partners that are diverse, that give you a picture into what solving this problem might look like for other customers that are similar to them. You get to iterate and try things out before you hit the market. And it just gives you a way to ensure that you're actually doing something that matters to people. So let's dive into the nitty-gritty. I'm going to take you through 3 phases of co-development process. It starts with the plan you make, the process you go through to actually build the product together, and then finally I'll touch a little bit on how to launch a product that's been co-developed. There's 3 steps that you want to go through when you're planning to co-develop. You want to choose the right partner, agree on metrics and business outcomes, and finally align on activities. Choosing good partners is essential. I highly recommend that you work with more than one partner. Having multiple partners allows you to balance the feedback you're receiving and not over-index on what just one customer or one partner might be thinking. The diversity here, I cannot stress how important it is. You want to find partners that are in the same problem space, but might have different regions or different sizes or different scales of that issue to really make sure you're covering all the bases with your solution. Once you've found the right people that you want to work with, it's great to agree on the business outcomes that you're seeking. In practice, I like to create outcome statements that the business can get excited about. An example would be, what if we could cut your costs of development by 50%? Or what if we could make this process 10 times more efficient? These clear metrics give you something to work towards and something that is enticing enough to keep your partner engaged with the study and with the process of development. There might be differences in the metrics that your company cares about and the metrics that your partner cares about. And while it's okay for them to be different, you want to make sure that you're aligned on a common goal. And that's why these outcome statements are critically important for making sure there's alignment between you two. You're definitely going to be using these metrics and these business outcomes as you make decisions and even as you prioritize features moving forward. Finally, you want to make sure that you actually align on the activities that you'll be going through together to both understand and execute the development of a solution. How will you get to know your customer? Who are the types of people that you're going to need to have access to? What will you do day to day? How will you actually execute on a pilot for this new technology or solution? And is your partner willing to disrupt major workflows in order to actually test out what your team has created? Most importantly, you're going to want to get clear on how long this relationship or this process will last. Will it be 12 months or 6 months or maybe even 12 weeks if you're doing a rapid iteration? Agreeing on these activities upfront can really add clarity to the whole process and help you understand how many resources or how much time it might actually take to get to a solution. An example from my professional career is when I was working on a Microsoft layout. We chose 2 partners who both had space planning needs. Now there was one partner who owned their own spaces, but they were scaling rapidly, opening hundreds of stores a year. Then we had another customer or another partner who actually had to work in their space planning within their client spaces. So they didn't actually own the real estate they were working in. And they also had high and low seasons of activity throughout the year instead of constant opening of stores. Finally, we also had an internal customer that in terms of size was right in the middle and gave us a detailed, in-depth access to someone that we could iterate with very, very quickly. We aligned on reducing the cost that it takes to design these spaces by bringing in holograms to replace the materials that they might use during the space planning process. And we also benchmarked on the time that it takes to go from idea to an actual approved design. This alignment gave us the focus and clarity that we needed to enter into a relationship where we could learn about what our customers need and test out our solution. I'll talk more about what we actually did or how you actually engage on the next slide. Before I move forward, I want to say that now, during the planning phase, is an amazing time to sign some paperwork. I'm not a lawyer and this isn't legal advice, but if you put an agreement in place for your co-development experience, it can save you a lot of headaches. You can avoid things such as the issue of ownership, who owns the technology or solution that is created. You can confirm the commitment of your partner team, that they're willing to put pen to paper and commit to going through this process of learning and developing together. You can also ensure any confidentiality that might be necessary in protecting the problem that you're working on and the solutions that you created. You can get specific details around the payment, pricing, or exchanging of resources that will be shared during this development process. And finally, you can identify the key milestones of how the process will progress, including a clause about when it might be time to quit, when the process might not be working for you or your partner teams. And hopefully you go ahead and sign that paperwork, and then you can move on to actually doing the co-development. So how do you do it? First, you want to start with listening and learning. Observing and seeing the processes that your partner teams go through will really help you understand what they do day to day and what they're trying to achieve. This is a time where I want to highly encourage you to work with your user research team to plan these observational studies so that you can do them in a way that is not disruptive or distracting to the work that's going on. You can also, in addition to shadowing, do interviews of specific roles or disciplines that you identify as being critical to the workflows in the problems that you're trying to solve. Now, once you've been able to map out some key user journeys, you can understand where your product can actually make impact and what features might be necessary to solve the problem, whether it's increasing speed or decreasing or increasing the efficiency of the workflows. Now that you know what features you might be interested in building, you can put together lo-fi mocks or prototypes to test out these ideas. The reason why you want to keep the fidelity low is because you want to be able to find the truth, find out what works and what doesn't work with the minimum amount of investment. This will save you time and money to invest in your real future, and it allows you to iterate a lot more quickly when you've put in less effort up front. This is a perfect time for you to make multiple versions of the solution that you're building and figuring out how you can balance the feature requests that are coming in from the multiple partners that you're working with. This should meet you in a middle ground. I highly recommend doing brainstorms with your customers to see what they might be thinking or innovative solutions that may come from outside of your team. Once you have those mocks and you've built out an MVP of what you're looking for, now it's time to test and measure. You want to put tests in place that actually help realize whether or not you're hitting those key metrics or whether you're able to produce those business outcomes. The measurement and test that you do here is going to be critical to the marketing aspect of your launch, and we'll get to that in a second. Now, this may seem like the normal product development process. But in this process, you have a stakeholder that's not just a recipient, not just someone that's responding to what you're creating, but you're deeply engaged. And as Ariel, the Little Mermaid, would say, you truly become part of their world. You don't make decisions in isolation. You get to make decisions hand in hand, where you can inspire, test, iterate, and create a cycle of development where you can move quickly, learn quickly, and produce something that actually matters. When you see that things aren't working, you can quickly pivot by shipping a new build, and you don't have to send it out to millions or hundreds of customers to get that feedback. You know that you have representative customers that you can call up or email or sometimes even text to get quick insights on what you're doing. This cuts down your time to market significantly. An example from my professional career of doing this was working on the blood donations team at Facebook. My team was able to actually travel to India, Brazil, and blood banks across the United States to get a deep understanding of the blood systems that exist around the world. Some of the members of the team even went through the blood donations process themselves to truly gain and develop empathy for what donors were doing. Our goal in working with these blood banks was to help them recruit new donors in the virtual space. So we created mocks, both for the blood banks and for the blood donors, getting feedback on whether or not this is something that would make sense to them or something that would drive the outcomes that we had aligned on earlier. We did small tests by launching in cities and states regionally, and we were able to assess what the impact was of bringing in those new blood donors and how consistently they started to donate. We did this hand in hand with these blood bank partners. They knew their space better than we did, and we knew the technology better than they did. And together we were able to bridge that gap to make sure that we created an experience for donors that was enjoyable and effective for both businesses. So let's get to the fun part, which is the launch. First, let me say congratulations, you made it here. You should be really proud of all the effort and the work that you put into creating this product with your partners. You want to work with your marketing team or your product marketing team to tell the amazing story of the process that you went through, all of the investments and learnings that you did to ensure that this product would specifically meet customer needs. This is going to be an amazing selling point as you go out and market the new thing that you've created. It's super important that you share the results. If you were able to make a process 10x more efficient, or if you were able to save hundreds or millions of dollars in an operation, and you have proof that you've been able to do that for not one, but two very different organizations, you'll build faith and confidence in other people who might be interested in adopting that solution in the future. This is a great opportunity to talk about the top features that your solution might have, and even tell anecdotes and stories about how you discovered that this was a need. It might not have met your original expectations, but maybe during a user research study or during an observation, or even during a test, you discovered some new insight that allowed you to make this differentiating feature. Now, there might still be people that are skeptical, and so I want to encourage you to also include in your launch a teaser of what might be next. Maybe you weren't able to build everything up front, but when you tease the features that are in your backlog, you can build confidence in those people who might see those missing features as something that would make them not buy. Lastly, this process should be highly iterative, highly collaborative, and very fulfilling for you and your team. This focused partnership is allowing you to create something that really, really works. And in the future, you can expand from working with individual partners to an even larger open beta, so you can have more diversity and more experiences in which to influence your backlog and roadmap for creating products in the future. Thank you so much for taking the time to get an introduction to co-development. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me on social media via LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, or even SuperPeer. I'm excited to answer your questions in a session that we'll host later in the conference. I hope you enjoy continuing to learn, and I hope you do in the future get an opportunity to co-develop a product with a partner. Enjoy the conference.
Thank you, Jasmine. For our third and final speaker of this session, we have Nickey Skarstad. Nickey is a senior product manager at Shopify with over 10 years of experience leading consumer-facing product teams, building community, e-commerce, and marketplace software. Let's give a warm welcome to Nickey for her presentation, Establishing Measurable Product Quality.
Hey everyone, my name is Nickey Skarstad and I am a senior product lead at Shopify. And today I'm here to talk about establishing measurable product quality. And before I jump in and get to the meaty content, I wanted to just share a little bit about my background so you have some context on where I'm coming from and how I've interacted with product quality throughout my career. So I've been in product roles for about 10 years now. Today, most recently, I'm at Shopify and I lead products and pricing. Before Shopify, I was VP of product for a company called The Wing. And before that, I worked at Airbnb and I was one of the early PMs who worked on Airbnb experiences. And before that, I worked at Etsy and was an early employee and helped them find product market fit and grow and scale the Etsy that we all know and love today. And so throughout my career, I've interacted with this concept of product quality in a lot of different ways. And as a product manager, I actually hear people use sort of the term quality, or they talk about product quality. It always means very different things. And so what I want to do today is tell you a little bit about how I've seen this abused sometimes, but how you can really set your team up for success. So they're thinking about quality throughout the entire life cycle of when you're building products. And so when you're shipping things, it's actually putting a really high quality, tangible experience in your users' hands. So let's jump in. So the bad news is we'll start in a bad place and we will get to a better place, is that you really need to define this up front. It seems kind of obvious, but I think a lot of teams don't do this, or they wait till the very end to define product quality. And you really need to do this because you are, every day in your role, you're making a large number of product decisions, and these add up. If you actually calculate the sum of all the product decisions you make, it is your end product. And if you don't think about quality and put it front and center, what you're going to do is you're going to wind up at the end. And if you've made any decisions that are not in the vein of quality or don't sort of get at what you're trying to actually, the experience you're trying to create for your user, tends to add up, and you can really feel it when you actually ship something. So that was bad news. We're going to get to the good news because it's all on you, and you can figure out how to define this early and how you can help your team figure it out. So the best time to do this, again, is at the very beginning. And this is because the cost of your time, your resources are small. You haven't spent a lot of time building. You're not going to uncover things around quality that you're going to have to rebuild later. And you can really, again, set sort of the quality principles and the primitives with your team early, and they can be thinking about them throughout the whole user journey that you're shipping. So there's this sort of agile definition of quality that I've seen kicked around a lot. This is called the quality triangle. And really what this is saying is that, you can't scrimp on the value that you create or the quality that you're adding with the resources that you have. And resources can be time, it can be people, any number of different things. And I think this is an important concept because when you think about quality, right, you need to make sure, again, that you're setting your team up for success, that you have the right team, the right resources, and the right time that you need to actually be able to build something that's going to create value and that's going to be a high quality experience. Also, that agile definition of quality slightly is different, or it's tweaked from how I like to think about it. So when I think about quality, I think about it more as sort of like the amalgamation of all of the different things that you're doing. So that can be things like maintainability, reliability. Those things to me tend to be less important to the user, depending on what you're building. Where there are other things like, delightability and how you actually interact with, engage with your product. And so quality here to me seems more almost like the things that you would figure out at the end, like the bugs that you're going to introduce into production or things like that. And so what do I actually mean by quality? So to me, product quality is how everything comes together. It is, if you think about a symphony, you have all these different instruments playing. The sound of that all coming together is quality. It is a very strange metaphor. I hope it works here. But there's things like usability. Is it delightable? Is it performant? Is it maintainable? Is it secure? Is it safe? And all of those things really add up to make the experience that you feel that's really tangible in your hands. And that's going to make a high quality experience. And so some of these things you actually need to build into the product throughout your design process, and some of the things you're going to figure out later, right? Like even quality assurance or doing a bug hunt before you launch, those come later. So when I was actually preparing for this talk, one of the things that I did is I asked a number of product people that I work with and that I've worked with in the past throughout the industry, what they think this means. And I really got a lot of different answers from a lot of different people, which is fine. This is definitely defined differently in different places. I also heard, I heard very different things from specific PMs, and I saw that this was being thought about very differently at different companies. And so what you have to do as a product manager who's working with your team to define quality is you need to decide what it means to you, what it means to your users, the product that you're building, and the company that you're at, as it's probably going to be variable depending where you're working at. I've also heard some bigger companies or different companies actually have this defined pretty clearly. They have a product quality goal. It's something that they're measuring, and some companies don't. So it's up to you to kind of set your team on the right track. So when you actually get to the point in your project where you're shipping something, it comes to life in a really high quality way. So how do you do this? So rather than thinking about quality at the very end, think about it through your life cycle. So there's all these different stages, right? It's the beginning of when you're conceiving of an idea, when you're starting to do early planning, to how you're building it, how you're actually writing the code that's going to actually bring the thing to life. How you are shipping it, or how you're actually bringing it to your community, your user, etc. And then how you're helping it be used and adopt, and how your users are actually interacting with the thing that you've built. So again, it's weaving these things throughout. And one really simple way to make sure this comes to life in the way that you're excited about is to actually put some metrics and some goals behind it. And so let's talk about that. Before I do that, I just couldn't not use a meme from the Suez Canal that was all over Twitter a few weeks ago because it cracked me up. But to take that meme and to use it in this context, this is like saying that you're going to solve for all of your product quality issues right before launch. And you're to discover big things that are deeply baked into your product, decisions that have added up over time, and that you're going to fix them right before launch. This is obviously flawed because, again, if it's a lot of little decisions or little things that you've done that didn't align up with your quality measurement, you're going to be in trouble when you get to the end and you actually need to ship the thing and you don't have time to fix all of the issues that you introduced, right? So forgive my terrible metaphor, I hope it's okay. So how do you establish measurable quality? So taking a step back, for me and what I've seen really work at different companies is to set a really clear North Star metric or goal. The more measurable it is, the better. Things that tend to be really squishy or that are very experiential, like make a delightful experience. What does that mean? Push on your team to get really clear and to define exactly what that means in your context for your team so you can measure it. In a second, I'm gonna talk about some different case studies of how at Airbnb and at Etsy and how we measured this specifically and created specific measurements. But quickly just running through the list of what you can do is first to defining some really clear quality principles. So what is a principle? That's something that is going to help your team make the right decisions on a day-to-day basis when they're in the weeds making very small decisions because they add up. Also get clear on what metrics you actually think will that you can track. So I love this idea of aligning on a simple North Star metric, something again that's really measurable, and then working with your team to define all of the different inputs or the drivers that are going to add up into that output. And then this way you understand when you're building something, making sure that you're hitting all of these inputs and the feature or whatever it is that you're building is actually going to hit these notes that are going to track up to this higher level North Star metric. So let's ground this in a real example. So here's an Etsy example. So when I was working at Etsy years ago, we were working on Etsy onboarding. So this is when you are a seller and you create a shop to sell at. One of the things that we discovered early on is we made a bunch of changes that made it really, really easy to open a shop. We actually made it too easy because what we saw happening was those shops that had just breezed through our onboarding process, they didn't have the right education or information they needed to actually be able to sell. And we saw them be less successful over time because we didn't equip them in the ways that we needed to. So we set a new goal and we wanted to help our sellers get to a sale quickly and to educate them on how to get to that first sale. And so what we did is we came up with, essentially figured out all the inputs that added up and really figured out how within the experience we were going to drive those inputs. So for example, quantity of listings made a big difference, making sure that you had enough products out there for people to be piqued, or their interest to be piqued enough, where they were going to be able to find something that they wanted to buy. We also saw that the quality of listings really mattered. So when you were actually going through the flow and you're listing products, we gave you a ton of education on how to actually create a really high quality listing. We also saw perceived value, or the value that you were communicating to your buyer, really mattered as well. So that was having clean pricing, doing things like discounts and promotions, and really setting your buyers up so they could purchase. And so we tailored our experience to hit all of those different points, and then consequently, we increased the number of new shops that were actually getting a sale. And so when I say a quality metric, that was a high quality metric because it actually it was a high quality metric. It's very meta, because it really helped the team make the right decisions in the process. So they were all running in the same place and they knew what was important, and then they could bring the experience to life in a way that impacted that North Star metric. So that's one example. The next one we're going to talk about is at Airbnb. So for context here, one of the things that we really cared about from a quality perspective at Airbnb was a 5-star review. So this makes sense, right? This is how a lot of marketplaces actually tangibly measure the quality of the experience on the platform. And this was especially important for Airbnb experiences. Airbnb experiences is interesting because there was an online component, which was the actual listing that you created, and then there was an offline component, which was the experience that you went on. And so we did a lot of work to get really clear on how we could measure, how we could actually drive 5-star experiences, which came to life in 5-star reviews. And those were some things like host quality, making sure that when we brought hosts onto the platform, they had the right level of access, they could create really awesome connection with the guests on the experience, and that they had the right expertise. We also looked at the online quality to make sure that the online quality was communicating what was special about the offline quality. So we did things like we introduced videos and really high quality production to the listings, so people really understood what they were buying. And then when they actually went on the experience, they weren't surprised. So that was like video, photo quality, description quality, and searchability. So we could have picked any number of metrics, like, just purchases, but we went one step farther and we decided that 5-star reviews were important because it had a deep quality impact for our users. So that's my Airbnb example. And there's a lot of other things that you'll encounter in your day-to-day. And I actually made a download for you to kind of do some brainstorming and to kind of figure out which metrics you want to track and what the inputs are. And I encourage you to go download them, sign up for my Substack. I have a newsletter called Builders, where I send it out usually bi-weekly, and talk about life as a product manager. But I will share a download there. So sign up and you can download more and do an exercise and make sure that you are shipping really awesome quality products. Thanks so much. I hope everyone has a great day, and thanks for watching.
Thank you, Alysha, Jasmine, and Nickey, and to all of you who have joined us today. Did you enjoy this presentation as much as I did? Well, you can connect with speakers in our follow-up interactive sessions later today. And if you haven't already, download the app for complete agenda details and access to stage recordings. Stage recordings are available at the end of each day, along with any worksheets, slides, and other resources. Also, if you have any feedback, we'd love to hear it. You can review sessions and talks in the app as well. Coming up next on the stage, you'll be joining me and we'll be tuning in the voice of your customer. Hope to see you there.